Hi, everyone. This is Greg. I was going to do this live for class tonight, but because of some technical as well as some lectures that have come up, I am recording this session for you. Even though this week we are covering change management, so I'm back, and one of the questions, what I'm going to do here is I have a series of about 56 to 60 slides. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to highlight some about happiness, and I'm going to make all of these PowerPoints available to you. It's been an area of interest of mine. It's been a big interest of Jim Smither. I don't know, you of course heard Jim Smither on these tapes. He's one of the co-developers of this course. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a reference where you can go to explore this more. So I'm going to quickly go through these slides and just highlight some things. There's different definitions of happiness from different people. Most people tend to be reasonably happy. There's a way of happiness gets measured. It's a scale called subjective well-being. It's psychologists talk for happiness and talks about how satisfied you are with your life, etc. And there's different measures of happiness. But the bulk of these slides, the beginning of all of these slides are around the myths of happiness. For example, is happiness related to age? A survey in 16 nations found that knowing someone's age gave no clue about the person's sense of well-being. Life gets better in one's perception as one ages. About 33% of Americans reported being very happy at age 88 versus about 24% of those at 18 in their early 20s. So I think the myth is that we would tend to be less happy as we get older. So what happens with happiness in old age? This study talks about socializing with neighbors, etc. Another question, does happiness have a favorite sex? Men are 5 times as vulnerable as women to alcoholism and antisocial personality disorder. Women are twice as vulnerable as men to disabling depression and anxiety. So, the net result is roughly equally hedonic balance, happiness for men and women. So there's kind of no gender difference when it comes to happiness. Does happiness vary by race? Knowing someone's race or ethnic group also gives little clue to the person's happiness. Does happiness vary by culture? Nations differ markedly in happiness even when income differences are controlled for. Satisfaction with one's country is positively related to individual level happiness. So it seems that the country you live in has quite an effect. Are rich people happier, or does money buy happiness? A lot of times our collegians, or when you entered college, that being well off financially was an important goal. But does this lead to happiness? Most adults share materialism and belief that increased income would make them happier. This is one of the myths that's talked about. Are people in rich countries happier than those in poor countries? Religion was not positively related to national levels of life satisfaction. Within any country are rich people happiest? Having food, shelter, and safety is basic to happiness. But once people can afford life's necessity, increasing levels of influence matter little. So I'm running through here quickly a lot of different studies on happiness. A recent study in the Proceedings of the National Academy found that beyond household income of $75,000 a year, money does nothing for happiness, enjoyment, sadness, or stress. So basically what's being said here are there's a certain threshold of money we need to achieve, and then beyond that, happiness doesn't necessarily increase. So just going through this, as I said, I will make these slides available to you. And here's an interesting study. Consumer research has found that materialism, high importance placed on acquiring wealth and possessions, is negatively correlated with happiness and self-esteem, and is positively correlated with self-criticism. It's food for thought. Some studies found the relative importance of the goal of financial success was negatively associated with happiness and self-esteem, and positively correlated with depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders. The stronger the goal for financial success, the lower the satisfaction with family life, regardless of income. So, yes, it's important to try and get the material gains that we need, but it doesn't necessarily result in happiness. As cultures become more affluent, do their people become happier? 1957, America's per-person income expressed in today's dollars was less than $8,000. Today it is more than $16,000. Compared with 1957, we have twice as many cars per people, plus microwave ovens, color TVs, all this. So are we happier than in 1957? Not necessarily. In sum, over the past 25 years, the world as a whole has experienced exceptional economic growth, widespread democratization, and increasing tolerance of social diversity. These changes expanded freedom of choice, which in turn led to rising levels of happiness. Another one is it better to give than to receive? A lot of studies done in this area. Personal spending was unrelated to happiness. Pro-social spending was positively related to happiness. Pro-social spending is giving to charity or giving to help others. In 120 of the countries, there was a positive relationship between giving and happiness. Individuals in poor and rich countries alike reported more happiness if they engaged in pro-social spending. People obtain more happiness from pro-social spending when giving provides the opportunity to connect with other people. So, the myth of happiness, a summary. The general conclusion from almost a century of research on the determinants of well-being is that objective circumstances, demographic variables, and life events are correlated with happiness less strongly than intuition and everyday experience tell us they ought to be. So all these things we talk about only account for about 18 to 15% of the variance on happiness. Happiness is enhanced when, I'm going to kind of shift now and talk a little bit about happiness and think about yourself, think about what we've been talking about here. Happiness is enhanced when people's goals are intrinsic, a community contribution, emotional intimacy, feasible and realistic, valued by one's culture and not conflicting. People are relatively happier when they choose to pursue success rather than to avoid failure, are highly committed to their goals, and believe they are making progress toward them. Happy people tend to be less sensitive to social comparison information than unhappy people. In other words, one of the things that doesn't lead to happiness is comparing yourself to the Joneses. People who engage in comparison and try and base their happiness on how am I doing relative to other people don't tend to be happy. Unhappy individuals tend to be deflated rather than delighted about their colleagues' accomplishments and are relieved in the face of colleagues' failures. Unhappy students reported feeling happier and more self-confident when they received a poor evaluation, but heard a peer received an even worse one than when they received an excellent one. So, be on guard if you're constantly comparing yourself. Unhappy people hold themselves culpable for their team's losses, but fail to commend themselves for their team's victories. Happy individuals use social comparison information sparingly. So what do we know about happy people? There are several traits that seem to mark happy people. Extroversion, not necessarily being an extrovert, but it means just kind of being outgoing a little bit when meeting other people. Self-esteem seems to be very important, especially in individualistic cultures like the United States. A sense of personal control, a sense that I have some measure of control over my life. Hardiness, hardy personality, optimism, and low neuroticism, from the personality scale. So people who can name several intimate friends with whom they share their intimate concerns freely are healthier, less likely to die prematurely, and happier than people who have few or no such friends. So being able to develop relationships is real important on the happiness scale. If the goal of a society is to raise the daily enjoyment of its citizens, it is important to devise ways to increase its relational wealth, social support, and strong social networks. This is a big issue. And in the time we're in now of COVID-19, where we tend to be isolating, happiness and well-being is very much related to social support and social interaction. Important thing to keep in mind. 3 out of 4 married people say their spouse is their best friend, and 4 out of 5 say they would marry the same person again. Married adults are more likely than never married adults to say that they're very happy. So I think this goes along, the marriage studies just go along with that notion of the importance of close personal relationships and friends. Doing versus having, some interesting things. Experiential purchases, money spent on doing, tend to provide more enduring happiness than material purchase, money spent on having. Sorry, got interrupted by the phone. I guess I think this is an important topic that experiential types of things bring more happiness than purchases. Experiences tend to produce more enduring satisfaction than do possessions. Experiential purchases tend to make people happier because they evoke fewer comparisons, are more associated with self, and foster more social connection. Just in my own life, this is a truism. I certainly remember experiences I've purchased much more over some material things. 4 studies in 2010 found that waiting for experiences also tends to be more positive than waiting for possessions. This is why we look forward to the holidays so much, vacations, Christmas holidays, 4th of July holiday, whatever. People derive more happiness from the anticipation of experiential purchase than they do from the actual purchase. Knowing and looking forward to buying a new car makes me happier than the actual purchase of the new car. Here's another important concept, the flow of happy people. When work is a pleasure, life is a joy. When work is a duty, life is slavery. I think that is so true. And for many people, work provides personal identity. It helps people define who they are. It offers a network of supportive relationships. And work can add focus and purpose, a sense that one's life matters. Maybe work is the wrong word. Any kind of, when we use the word work, it would include paid and unpaid work. Sometimes work isn't satisfying. We can be overwhelmed when challenges exceed our time and skills. We can be underwhelmed when challenges do not engage our time and skills. When what we do engage and match skills, we enter an optimal state that this psychologist, who I won't try and pronounce, calls the flow. It's called a state of being in the flow. And any of you that are jazz aficionados, Grover Washington, the great Philadelphia saxophonist, had a great piece called In the Flow. So to be in the flow is to be unself-consciously absorbed. One gets so caught up in an activity that the mind does not wander. One becomes oblivious to surroundings and time flies. And you can think of a time when this is happening. A lot of times it happens for people when they are doing recreation. They're in the flow. And the ideal is if we can have a job that is much like our favorite recreational activity, so much the better. But that's what being in the flow means. And when I talked about some of the concepts of mindfulness earlier in the semester, a lot of the concepts of mindfulness are an attempt to get people in the flow, to be engaged 100% with the present moment. And that's what this is about. Being in the flow means that we are 100% engaged in the present moment. We're not thinking about the past or regretting it and not worrying about the future. We're engaged right now in what we're doing. His studies have discovered that happiness comes not from mindless passivity, but from engagement in mindful challenge. Whether at work or at leisure, people enjoy themselves more when absorbed in the flow of an activity than when doing nothing meaningful. Involvement in interesting activities, including engaging work, is a major source of happiness. So in summary about happiness, one, what we find about happiness, several close, intimate relationships. Having a sense of commitment to something and kind of feeling in control. having an important social support and network out there, and then whatever we do, being in the flow, living in the moment, and engaging in the moment. So, throughout this semester, many of the concepts we talk about and many of the ideals that we've talked about keep bumping up against this notion of satisfaction or happiness, life satisfaction, work satisfaction, etc. So that's why I chose to end on some thoughts on happiness. I will make these slides available. And then finally, here is a website you can go to if you're interested in this topic. This is at the University of Pennsylvania. And I think you'd find you can take a lot of surveys and different things like that. So I offer this for you. It's been a great semester. I enjoyed working with you. If any of you would like to get on Zoom and talk a little more personally about the course, I'd be more than happy to. So thank you.